Staff Sergeant David Martinez clutched the worn photograph of his wife Jennifer as the convoy rolled through the dusty Afghan countryside. 3 months into his second deployment, her letters were his lifeline, filled with love, updates about their small apartment in Georgia, and promises of the life they'd build together when he returned. "I miss you so much, baby," her latest letter read. "Counting down the days until you're home. The apartment feels so empty without you. I'm working extra shifts at the diner to save money for our future. Love you always, Jen." David smiled, carefully folding the letter back into his vest pocket. 6 more months, and he'd be home to his wife of 2 years. They'd gotten married just before his first deployment, a whirlwind romance that had started in high school and survived through boot camp and training. The IED explosion that nearly killed David's best friend Marcus 3 weeks later changed everything, but not in the way David expected. Marcus survived with severe injuries and was medically evacuated home. David was devastated for his friend, but grateful Marcus would recover. What he didn't expect was the phone call that came 2 days later. "Dave, man, I don't know how to tell you this." Marcus's voice was strained, medication making his words slow and careful. "I'm at Walter Reed, and I saw Jennifer yesterday." David's heart lifted. "That's great. I knew she'd want to visit you. She's always cared about my brothers in arms." "Dave, she wasn't alone. She was with some guy. They looked like a couple, man. I'm sorry." The satellite phone felt heavy in David's hands. "What do you mean? Maybe it was her brother, or—" "I asked the nurse. She's been coming to visit patients with her boyfriend for weeks. They think she's dating this civilian contractor who got hurt in a car accident. Dave, I'm so sorry." David's world tilted. He ended the call and sat in his bunk, staring at Jennifer's latest letter dated just 3 days ago. "Working extra shifts at the diner. The apartment feels so empty." Over the next week, David's fellow soldiers watched him spiral. He barely ate, couldn't sleep, and nearly got everyone killed during a patrol when his mind wandered. Finally, his commanding officer pulled him aside. "Martinez, you're getting emergency leave. Whatever's going on at home, you need to handle it before you get someone killed." The 18-hour journey home gave David too much time to think. He'd tried calling Jennifer multiple times, but she never answered. Her texts were brief. "Working double shifts. Can't talk now. Love you." David didn't go home first. Instead, he went straight to Walter Reed to see Marcus, who was recovering well but looked miserable when David walked in. "I wish I'd been wrong, brother," Marcus said quietly. "Tell me everything." Marcus described seeing Jennifer in the hospital cafeteria, laughing with a man in his 30s. They were holding hands, sharing food, completely comfortable with each other. Marcus had watched them for 20 minutes before approaching. "I introduced myself as your friend from your unit. The guy, Ryan something, he had no idea Jennifer was married. When I mentioned you, Jennifer went white. She made some excuse and they left." David felt sick. "How long has this been going on?" "The nurses said they'd been seeing them together for about 6 weeks, since right after you deployed." David sat in his rental car outside their apartment building for an hour, gathering courage. Jennifer's car was there, along with an unfamiliar pickup truck. Through their second-floor window, he could see movement, shadows of 2 people. He climbed the stairs with shaking hands and used his key to open the door. Jennifer was on the couch with a man David didn't recognize. The man's shirt was off, Jennifer was in a robe, and they were clearly about to be intimate. They froze when they saw David in his combat uniform. "David!" Jennifer scrambled to her feet, clutching the robe. "You didn't tell me you were coming home?" The other man, Ryan presumably, looked confused and guilty. "I thought you said your husband was deployed for another 6 months." "He is. I mean—" "David, what are you doing here?" David set his duffel bag down slowly, his military training keeping him calm despite the rage building inside. "I could ask you the same question, Jen." The confrontation that followed revealed the scope of Jennifer's betrayal. Not only had she been cheating with Ryan for 2 months, but she'd also been systematically draining their joint bank account. "Where's the money, Jennifer?" David asked, pulling up their account on his phone. "We had $12,000 when I deployed. There's $300 left." Jennifer's face crumpled. "I can explain. The extra shifts at the diner, the saving money for our future. All lies?" Ryan, who had been trying to dress quietly, spoke up. "Jennifer, you told me you were divorced. You said your ex-husband was behind on alimony payments." David turned to Ryan with surprising calm. "She's not divorced. We've been married for 2 years. I'm deployed in Afghanistan, sending her money every month to take care of our home." Ryan's face went red with anger and embarrassment. "Jennifer, what the hell?" He grabbed his clothes and pushed past both of them. "I don't want any part of this mess." After Ryan left, David and Jennifer sat at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten their last dinner together before his deployment, where she'd promised to wait for him. "How long?" David asked. "It just happened, David. You've been gone, and I was lonely." "How long?" 2 months, she whispered. "And the money?" Jennifer broke down completely. She'd been spending it on clothes, restaurants, weekends away with Ryan. She'd told Ryan she was financially struggling, so he'd been helping with expenses while she spent David's deployment money on their relationship. "I maxed out the credit cards too," she admitted through tears. "I was going to figure it out before you came home." David stared at the woman he'd married, the woman he'd dreamed about every night in a war zone, the woman whose letters had kept him sane through the worst moments of his deployment. "I risked my life every day thinking about coming home to you," he said quietly. "I turned down R&R leave because I wanted to save the money for us. I ate MREs while my buddies went to the good chow hall because I was sending you every extra penny." "David, please." "I have buddies who will never come home. Marcus nearly died, and he's the one who had to tell me about this because he couldn't stand to see me living in a fantasy." David stood up and walked to their bedroom that clearly had evidence of another man's presence. Ryan's cologne hung in the air, his razor was by the sink, there were clothes that weren't David's in the hamper. "How many times did you bring him here?" "To our bed?" Jennifer couldn't meet his eyes. "David, answer me." "I don't know. Several times." David packed his dress uniforms, his personal items, and the few things that mattered to him. Jennifer followed him around the apartment, crying, begging, making promises she'd already proven she couldn't keep. "I love you," she kept saying. "It was a mistake. I'll end it with Ryan. We can start over." David zipped up his duffel bag and turned to face her. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to do this. If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen from me while I was dodging bullets. If you loved me, you would have at least had the decency to ask for a divorce before moving another man into our home." "Where are you going?" "Back to base. I'm requesting to finish my deployment." Jennifer's eyes widened. "You're going back to Afghanistan?" "It's more honest than here." David drove straight to Fort Stewart and requested to speak with his commanding officer. Within 48 hours, he was on a plane back to Afghanistan, having signed divorce papers and closed their joint accounts. His unit was surprised to see him back early, but they welcomed him with the understanding that only soldiers have for each other's pain. Nobody asked questions they didn't need answers to. Marcus called him a week later from his hospital bed. "How bad was it?" "Worse than you thought," David said. "She cleaned out our accounts, too." "Jesus, Dave, I'm sorry." "Don't be. You saved me from something worse. Imagine if I'd found out after I got home permanently." David threw himself into his duties with renewed focus. Without the distraction of a relationship to maintain, he became one of the most reliable soldiers in his unit. He volunteered for extra patrols, took on additional responsibilities, and found purpose in protecting his brothers in arms. The divorce was finalized while he was still deployed. Jennifer kept the apartment and the debt she'd accumulated. David kept his military benefits and his dignity. 6 months later, when David's deployment ended, he didn't go back to Georgia. Instead, he took a new assignment at Fort Carson in Colorado, starting fresh in a place with no memories of Jennifer. Marcus, who had recovered enough to return to civilian life, visited David in Colorado a year later. They were hiking in the Rocky Mountains when Marcus brought up the past. "Do you ever regret how it all went down?" Marcus asked. David considered the question as they reached a summit with a view of snow-capped peaks stretching to the horizon. "I regret trusting her. I regret not seeing the signs, but I don't regret learning the truth." "Any word from her?" "She tried calling a few times after the divorce was final. I heard through mutual friends that things didn't work out with Ryan once he realized what kind of person she really was." "Karma," Marcus said with satisfaction. "Maybe. Or maybe he just realized that someone who'll cheat with you will cheat on you." David had learned to live with the betrayal, but it had changed him. He was more cautious about relationships, slower to trust, quicker to spot red flags that he'd missed before. The experience had taught him that love alone wasn't enough. Character mattered more. 3 years after the divorce, David met Sarah, a teacher who worked with military families. She was patient with his guardedness, understanding about his past, and most importantly, she had the integrity that Jennifer had lacked. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened," Sarah told him early in their relationship, "but I'm asking you not to punish me for someone else's mistakes." David married Sarah 4 years after his divorce from Jennifer. This time he was older, wiser, and more careful about who he trusted with his heart. He'd learned that real love wasn't just about promises and pretty words. It was about actions, consistency, and character. Sometimes at night, when Sarah was sleeping beside him, David would think about the letters Jennifer had sent him in Afghanistan. All those lies wrapped in declarations of love, all those false promises while she was betraying him with someone else. But then, he'd look at Sarah, who had never once lied to him, who supported his military career, who understood the sacrifices service required, and he'd realize that Jennifer had actually done him a favor. She'd shown him what fake love looked like, making it easier to recognize the real thing when it finally came along. The betrayal that had once felt like the end of his world had actually been the beginning of his real life.